The New York Giants wrapped up 2 days of joint practices against the Detroit Lions. What takeaways and what did we learn from those 2 days? I'm going to give you my list coming up next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Hello, New York Giant fans. Welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credentialed member of the New York Giants media for both Locked On as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find my written work, NewYorkGiantsOnSI.com. And as always, special welcome on in to my everydayers, to my Blue Crew community members, to my newcomers, and everybody else in between. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And if you are watching on YouTube, please, won't you consider subscribing to the channel? Click the little bell so that you are notified every time I post a new video. And if you wouldn't mind, like the video. It all helps me in the long run, and it is appreciated. All right, on today's Locked On Giants podcast, the Giants wrapped up 2 days of joint practices with the Detroit Lions. It was a chance to go against some different faces, maybe some different schemes, different philosophies. It was a spicy 2 days filled with a lot of, fisticuffs, maybe not as much on day 2 as there was on day 1. But more importantly, what did we learn? What are the key takeaways about this Giants team that we learned from the 2 days? All right. So I've made a list on my little pad here, and I'm going to run down all of these items. I think I have about 8 or 9, something like that on this list. And that's going to be our entire show. So let's get into it. Got to start off, ladies and gentlemen, with Malik Nabers. All right. Now, here's the thing with Malik Nabers or any high profile player. Sometimes when a team acquires a high profile player, whether it be a draft pick, whether it be via trade, whether it be a free agent signing or whatever the case may be, sometimes, there's so much hype around that player. And, you see him during, the OTAs, you see him during training camp, and you say, wow, he really looks good. But you have to put it in the back of your mind that, is it really the player looking good, or is this a competition maybe not up to snuff? Sometimes it could be 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. So this was a good opportunity for Malik Nabers, the Giants' first-round draft pick, number 6 overall this year, to show, yeah, he was the real deal. And you know what, folks? He did just that. All right. Now, some of you might say, well, isn't the Detroit Lions defensive secondary still a work in progress? Yeah, it is. But you know what? Nabers went up mostly against Arnold, Terrion Arnold, their top cornerback, and he won more than he lost. I can tell you that. Now, I believe unofficially the numbers I had on Nabers was over the 2 days, and this includes 7-on-7 and 11-on-11. Nabers had 17 passes thrown to him, and he caught all but one. And he had 2 long touchdowns as part of it. This against the number 1 shutdown cornerback. So that being said, Nabers, ladies and gentlemen, has come as advertised. This young man is going to create headaches for opposing defenses. All right. He is going to open up things for the Giants offense. You can see the chemistry building between him and Daniel Jones. And wow, that's all I've got to say about Malik Nabers. Wow. The Giants, right now, based on all that we have seen and what we know about this young man, they hit a home run with this young man, with selecting him and adding him to the roster. Now, he's still learning. That's the fun part of it. It's like he gets up there and he says, I'm still learning. I'm still perfecting my game. So just imagine how much better he can get. All right. Once he learns all that he needs to learn and fixes, the little mistakes and stuff that he makes or he says that he's made. So this kid, I mean, if you're not excited about Malik Nabers, then I got nothing for you. So, all right. Item number 2. I spoke about the fights that peppered the 2 practices. And I mentioned on yesterday's program for my everydayers, who probably might remember this. I mentioned how the fighting, while not, endorsed by either head coach, what it told me is that the Giants are basically sick of getting picked on by the critics who say, oh, the Giants are going to finish dead last. They're going to have a top 2 draft pick. They're going to have this. They're going to have that. All the negativity surrounding the Giants. So whereas last year, the Giants, when they did the joint practices with the Lions basically beat them up and took their lunch money. That didn't happen this year. And, we talk about being tough. We talk about being aggressive. We talk about being competitive. We talk about not taking any snuff from the opponent. To me, there was a tale of 2 teams on that field. What I saw was a Detroit Lions team that had some guys that went rogue on them and maybe looked to start stuff up. And then you saw the Giants who, when they were challenged, they didn't back down. They didn't, necessarily go out of their way to start trouble, right? I think there was maybe one incident where you can say that the Giants were to blame for a shoving and pushing match. But for the most part, the Giants were disciplined. And you can be competitive, you can be tough, you can be all those things and still be spirited, but you have to be smart, because if you get stupid and you lose your cool in a game, guess what, folks? That's a penalty. And chances are, depending on the infraction, you might lose a player due to an ejection. So I just felt like, watching the Giants, this is a team that just isn't going to take it anymore. They are fed up. They're like, okay, we're going to show you guys, and not just the media, not just the Lions, but the whole NFL, we're going to show you that we are not a bunch of patsies anymore. We are the New York Giants. We are here to play. We are here to be tough, to be competitive, and just, go out there and do our thing. Will that translate to wins? That remains to be seen. But the important thing, I think, is that the Giants learned over these 2 days that they can stand toe-to-toe with a good team. And the Lions, say what you want about them, they came within this, inches of making the Super Bowl last year. They are a good team. They are coached well. They've got good players. They're a good team. All right. So the Giants standing toe to toe with them, as opposed to getting their doors blown off like they did last summer, that was a positive, in my opinion. So I really like what I saw from the Giants in terms of the toughness. All right. The next thing on my list, I thought this was, definitely a sigh of relief for me. The Giants' offensive line, despite all its injuries, and Evan Neal is missing and will continue to be missing, I think. And I would not be surprised if he lands on PUP to start the season. John Michael Schmidt's still sidelined. We're not going to see him the rest of the week. We might see him next week, but I'm not counting on it. The Giants' offensive line, considering, Greg Van Roten just came in like last week. Jermaine Illuminor has been working at right tackle. They've had Aaron Stinney in the lineup. The O-line held up against the Lions' defensive front, and that's a good defensive front. Watching the one-on-one drills, the Giants, they held their own against the Lions. I mean, it was like, wow, you're watching this and you're saying, okay, this offensive line, maybe it won't be as bad as we all think it might be, despite all the injuries. In the team drills, The quarterbacks basically had enough time to throw. We really didn't see very many pressures on the quarterbacks. The O-line held up, folks. That was very, very encouraging to see. And, if you're sitting there thinking, well, did the Lions go full blast? Yeah, they did. They absolutely did. And for the Giants offensive line to band together the way they did and hold that group led by Aiden Hutchinson off to the side, so to speak, that was really impressive and very reassuring to see. So we'll see if that continues during the course of the summer and into the season, but certainly a positive to take away. All right, I've got plenty more on my list coming up, so don't go anywhere. I'll have another 3 for you right after this. Hey, Giant fans, if you've begun your search for tickets, but you haven't had any luck, you need to check out Game Time. Game Time has a large inventory of tickets at competitive prices, and they make the buying experience so easy. There are no hidden fees. You'll know exactly what you're paying for before you check out. You'll get clear images of your seat views, and you'll also get event cancellation protection and last-minute money-saving flash deals. And if you find tickets elsewhere in the same section and row for less, Game Time will give you 110% of the difference. So go on and get the tickets that you want. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Terms apply. Hey, Giant fans, thank you for making the Locked On Giants podcast your first listen today. And now for your second listen, enjoy the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast. Get daily insights into the best fantasy draft strategies so that you can win your league this season. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and coming up on Locked On Giants, I'm going to chat with Matt Derry, who is the host of Locked On Lions. We'll kind of talk about the game that's coming up on Thursday. The Giants host the Detroit Lions in the preseason opener, and we'll probably talk a little bit about, what we saw and what we learned from each person's perspective. So that's going to be kind of like a little crossover show that'll be coming up. And then, of course, Thursday after the game, I'll have a reaction show. And then we'll just take you into the weekend. The Giants are off Friday. They're off Saturday. They're back on the field Sunday. So you know the drill. If there's a practice, I'm here. So I hope you will continue to tune in here to the Locked On Giants podcast. All right, getting back to our list of takeaways from the New York Giants joint practices with the Detroit Lions. I'm going to mix in some maybe not so positive ones here, but I got to be honest with you. It's not all roses and sunshine. I thought the Giants defensive secondary, and in particular cornerback 2, still a concern in my mind. Cordell Flott was up and down, kept rotating with Nick McLeod, who was, he was okay, but I just don't feel comfortable with the status of the cornerbacks right now. I just don't. There's a lot of youth there. I don't know that they really have a true veteran leader back there to kind of calm that unit down. And I think, that would certainly help. But I'm just not sure, folks, that the cornerback 2 position is anywhere close to being settled. There's just too much inconsistency for my tastes. Now, hopefully, when we see him on the game, play the games and whatnot, maybe that'll straighten out. But for me, and I've been saying this basically since training camp started, even going back to the spring, there's too much inconsistency. And I still have to wonder if the CB2 for this Giants is maybe not yet on the roster. It would not surprise me if that is the case. All right. How about, okay, I'll give you one more concern and then I'll get back to the positives, I promise. The run defense is still a bit of a concern. And in particular, the second team run defense just did not look good the last 2 days. Now, the Lions were actually gashing the Giants run defense wide. And I'm not sure what the problem was exactly, but there were plenty of big runs by the Lions that went, that were run wide. You would think that when something stretches out like that the speed on the other side would maybe string them out, and that was not the case. I saw defensive linemen getting sealed off. I saw guys getting out of position. So, if we're being honest here, I was not very happy with what I saw from the run defense. I thought that was a big, question mark. Dexter Lawrence was fine as always, but I just don't feel like they've settled the positions next to him. I know they said, I think head coach Brian Dable said Raheem Nunes-Roches is one of the guys that they're looking at who's had a good camp, and he has, but they were rotating different guys in as they do with the defensive line, and just not a very good, showing by the run defense, in my opinion. Okay, how about something positive now? All right, let's get back to the positive. And quite honestly, I just have one more negative, but I'm going to save it for the last segment. So, positive here. Brian Burns. Oh my gosh. Oh, wow. Brian Burns, ladies and gentlemen, that man is a terror. All right. That man in the one-on-ones, he was just beating his guys like a drum. It didn't matter who he was going up against. He beat every Detroit Lion offensive lineman like a drum. Brian Burns was getting into the backfield. I mean, he's got this quick spin move that, and he's so shifty, the way he just kind of makes you think he's going one way, then all of a sudden he shifts back and goes another way. He's just so much fun to watch. And you know what? Mad level of respect to this guy, because on Tuesday, he turned his ankle. I think it was the same ankle, the right ankle, that he injured earlier in training camp. And he never missed a beat. Okay. He came out of practice just for a little bit, had his ankle taped. And you would have thought, okay, well, maybe he's going to sit there and he's not going to, he's not going to practice the rest of the way. He was right back out on the field running and looking no worse for the wear. So, you just see the toughness in his game. You see the want to, and, going back to what I said about Malik Nabers, about how sometimes a top acquisition, you wonder if he's really going to play out for you and work out the way you want him to. So far, I got to say, Brian Burns has looked the part, and he is an exciting player on defense. And that's very reassuring to know that the Giants potentially spent wisely to acquire him. Maybe they spent a little too much, but if he turns out to be worth it, then who's going to complain at the end of the year? Certainly not me. So, all right. Coming up next, I've got 3 more. Okay. 2 positives, 1 negative. The negative is, maybe not too bad, but I'll let you decide. So don't go anywhere. I'll be back with those last 3 right after this. Hey, Giant fans, when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. They help you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but who might be open to the perfect role. 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours when they use LinkedIn. And did you know that LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier? They've just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process quicker. So go on and find out why 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring by posting your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. And again, thank you for spending part of your day with me here. I'm running down my takeaways From the last 2 days of practice, the Giants and Detroit Lions joint practices, very spirited, very hot and humid and uncomfortable, but a lot of good work was done. A lot of questions, I think, were on their way to being answered. Some questions still not answered. Some concerns still not resolved. But overall, I think if you're Brian Dable and the Giants, you got to feel good about what you put on tape the last couple of days. Now, I've got 3 more items that I want to talk about, my key takeaways. I'm going to get the negative one out of the way because I want to finish the show on a positive note. All right. The one negative that I'm going to talk about involves center John Michael Schmitz. Now, he missed another practice, as I mentioned earlier in the program. He has now missed, I think this is like his 8th one in a row. He's not going to play in the game on Thursday night. I would be surprised if he practices on Sunday when they come back. If he does not get out on the field, like soon, that's a concern. But anyway, it's a concern right now as far as I'm concerned. And here's why. John Michael Schmitz is a young player. I know he was the team's, second round draft pick last year, showed signs of promise. But the fact that shoulder that cost him 3 games last year has now flared up again, and that it is taking him this long to get back, he's losing valuable reps, folks. And here's the thing, at some point, if he continues to miss time, at some point, if you're Brian Dable, if you're Carmen Brasillo, the Giants offensive line coach, you've got to say, okay, here it is. We're X number of days away from the season. We've got to lock in our starting offensive line, our starting 5. So the more time John Michael Schmitz tends to miss, that's not good. I mean, you've got to sit there and ask yourself, will he be able to come back? Now, I think he will if he is healthy, but the more time he misses, he's losing valuable, instruction on the field, valuable reps. And, they've got Greg Van Roten playing center because right now they feel he's the best, candidate for that job. But that's now affecting the guard position because, they had to go back and plug in Aaron Stinney. Originally, I think they were going to go with Van Roten at one guard and John Runyon Jr. at the other. And they can't do that because Van Roten is the best option right now at center with John Michael Schmitz out. So in that regard, I think that's a little bit of concern. Even though, like I said in the previous segment, that the offensive line has held its own and looked good, the question now becomes is if John Michael Schmitz continues to miss time, if you're the coaching staff, do you disrupt any of that chemistry that this line has built to insert John Michael Schmitz back into the lineup? And how ready is he going to be? Because let me tell you something, folks, camp is flying by. And, if Schmitz isn't out there like next week when the Giants start to get ready for like Houston, that really is going to be, an interesting way on how they're going to handle it. And, I just don't know what the answer is. I would think if the line does well, you stick with what you got. But now you're looking at a case where you don't have Evan Neal, who is who was a first round draft pick. He's on PUP and he's probably going to start, the season on PUP. You don't have a second round draft pick that you spent on, a high premium pick on in the lineup in Schmitz. That's not a good look. So I'm just kind of curious to see what happens. And more importantly, like I said, because that shoulder keeps, this is the second go around with that shoulder popping up. At some point, maybe take a look at that and see if something's going on that, rest won't necessarily cure. Because if this is going to keep popping up, that's a concern. So, all right, I got that negative out of the way. Now let's finish the show on a positive note. 2 items. Daniel Jones has looked good. Let's call it what it is. All right, Daniel Jones, then the connection he has with Malik Nabers has been dynamite. The connections he's had with these receivers, wow. I mean, the passing game has looked good. Um, has it been perfect? No, but it has looked far better. And the fact that Daniel Jones has not missed a rep thus far since training camp started speaks volumes about the priority to get him ready, to get him comfortable. And I think, having Brian Dable calling the plays has helped to a degree to settle Daniel Jones down. So we'll see if that transfers into the games. I don't think Daniel's going to play Thursday night. I'd be surprised if he does. Might he get like a series or two in the game against Houston the following week? That's a possibility. So we'll just have to see how that all shakes out. But Daniel Jones, he's looked pretty good. Let's give the guy the credit he deserves. I don't know if it's the beard or what, but he has looked pretty good for the most part. All right, I got one more for you, and that is we are gaining some clarity on some positions. Specifically, the starting safety job next to Jason Pinnock. It is Dane Belton's job to lose. Dane Belton has looked really good in that role, holding off Tyler Nubin, who kind of got a late start because of a lower leg injury. Andrew Phillips has looked good at the slot cornerback position. I mean, this kid, he plays the game so fearlessly, and he doesn't take anything from anybody. Matter of fact, in some of the fights that went on, there was Andrew Phillips, not backing down. He's not the biggest guy in the world, but he is a tough hombre, and mad respect for that young man. I mean, there's still mistakes being made, but they haven't been to the point where you say, oh my God, you got to sit this guy down and put somebody else in there. So I think that slot cornerback job is just about wrapped up, and I think it's going to go to Drew Phillips, the 3rd-round pick this year. One other guy who I think has, a lead on his starting job, Raheem Nunes-Roches on that defensive line. And I talked about the defensive line a little earlier, but Nacho seems to be, in the lead for a job. And then on the offensive side of the ball, RB2, if it's not Tyrone Tracy, I'd be stunned. Tyrone Tracy has looked so good in pass pro, carrying the ball, coming out of the backfield as a receiver. He's just really comfortable, maybe a little more so than Eric Gray, who I see, when I watch Eric Gray, I kind of see some stutter stepping when he approaches the line, a little bit of dancing, if you will. Tyrone Tracy, boom, hits the hole and he's off. Out of the backfield, he's got that weave, that shiftiness that you like to see from a receiver trying to work through, the second level traffic and beyond. So I would be shocked if Tyrone Tracy isn't RB2 behind projected starter, Devin Singletary. So that's cleared up. I'm trying to think. Tight end is still, they're still trying to sort that out. Right now, Theo Johnson, I think, is slightly ahead of Daniel Bellinger. Bellinger hasn't gotten a whole lot of reps with the ones. I don't know if that's because they just want to see what Theo Johnson can do or if there's really something there, but Theo Johnson has looked good. I've been impressed by that young man. Wide receiver, they've got to sort out the bottom of the depth chart. And I think, one other battle that I don't think is being talked about enough, and I just wonder if maybe this one is en route to being settled, and that's the other inside linebacker spot next to Bobby Okereke. I think Deontay Johnson has really had a nice camp, maybe a little bit better than Micah McFadden, who, admittedly was slowed down by injury. But, Micah McFadden last year led the team in missed tackles. Deontay Johnson has been making plays. So I wonder if maybe he's going to edge out Micah McFadden for the starting job in the base defense. We'll have to see if that's the case. The jury's maybe still out on that, but they're getting close to a verdict, I would think, in that regard. So that's it, folks. That's my list. That'll do it for today's show. Again, thank you for tuning in, spending part of your day with us on the Locked On Giants podcast. Tomorrow, Matt Derry of Locked On Lions, he and I will do kind of like a crossover show, if you will. And we'll talk about what we saw. We'll talk about, all the stuff, the game upcoming. And just hope you'll tune in and continue to, watch. So I want to thank you again for tuning into the Locked On Giants podcast. And I will see you tomorrow, ladies and gentlemen.